Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to viewers from around the world. My name is Stefan van der Burgh, working as Market Development Manager with Eastman Chemical Company based in the Netherlands. And I'm here with my colleague Ana Macedo.
Hello, I'm Ana Macedo, Technical Service Manager for Personal Care Market at Eastman, based in our Technology Center in Belgium.
And we are happy to have you join us in this webinar around our new launch for the fragrance and personal care industry, the Eastman Sustane CG 200 Fragrance Fixative. And of course, we look forward to any questions you may have at the end of this session. And I want to thank our partner Special Chem for hosting and organizing this session. Now to the main topic of this webinar, our Sustane CG 200 Fragrance Fixative, that we believe can play an important role in consumer wishes for fragrance formulations with low oil content. As we imagine a consumer purchasing a fragrance product, they will mostly make that purchase based on the top notes, which typically last 5 to 15 minutes, especially with low fragrance oil content. For the consumer, this is often maybe a little bit disappointing, and they would want these top notes to last longer, but the consumer may not have the budget to buy formulations with a higher oil content. And we believe Sustane CG 200 can help you meet your consumer wishes, even at low fragrance oil levels. And in the next sections, Anna will explain how we came to this conclusion.
So we're going to navigate around the fragrance and longevity. You're going to see the performance results, the mode of action, the product properties, and the safety regards. And finally, we're going to summarize everything. So now we're going to introduce you our product, Eastman Sustane CG 200. So our product was developed together with industry experts. We worked with two partners, Pretty Little Aroma, which is a fragrance consultancy agency. This is managed by Haley Foster, a trained nose expert that worked for P&G, Unilever. And we also worked with Sensenet, a fragrance testing institute in France. We selected 18 different fragrances that were chosen for their olfactive family, and those fragrances were provided by Sense Design. On the left side, you can see the formulations we used for that study. A body splash with 1.5% of fragrance oil, and an eau de toilette formulation with 10% fragrance oil content. All the formulations were evaluated for intensity or longevity, odor profile or character. We used blotters for all the evaluations, and we checked the time points at 3, 8, 12, 24, and 48 hours. Sensenet and Pretty Little Aroma, they use different methodologies that we're going to see on the next slide. So on your left side, we have the methodology from Sensenet. The testing was a blind testing with 6 trained panelists. Scale always positive from 0 to 5, and the reference formulation without Sustane is also graded. On your right side, you have the methodology from Pretty Little Aroma. The scale of intensity can vary from negative to positive values, from less 10 to plus 10. And the intensity of the test formulations is evaluated against the reference formulation without Sustane CG 200. If you have positive values, that indicate that there is a higher intensity than the reference. If you have negative values, that indicates that you have a lower intensity than the reference. And again, the reference is always 0. Here's the data from Sensenet, resulted from a blind panel with 6 trained evaluators. The samples were body splash formulations with 1.5% of fragrance oil. On your top left, you have the results with female fragrance, and in the bottom, the results with male fragrance. The results are expressed in terms of intensity versus time in hours. The green line indicates the formulation without sustain, and the orange line indicates the formulation with 2% sustain. The intensity of the formulations containing sustain is consistently higher across the entire time range. But for both fragrances, it was concluded that the original character of the fragrance is kept with sustained CD200. And here is the data from Pretty Little Aroma, our trained nose consultant, which also evaluated body splash formulations containing 1 and 2% sustain. The green line at 0 indicates the control reference without sustain. At 1% of sustain, the orange line, we can see already a relevant increase in the intensity compared to the control. When we increase the sustained concentration to 2%, there is a slight increase in the intensity for the male fragrance case especially. After both studies, we concluded that a recommended concentration of sustain should start around 1 and 2%. And then a question came in, and if we increased the fragrance concentration to 10% or more, should we also increase sustained content proportionally? The answer is no, and I'm going to explain why. On your top left, you can find the graph of intensity versus time. For this test, we used an eau de toilette formulation with 10% fragrance oil. The black line indicates the formulation with 10% sustain. You can see that the intensity lowered down too much, below than the control without sustain. With 2% of sustained CD200, you get positive values. So intensity with sustained CD200 significantly and consistently higher compared to the control. And there's no distortion of fragrance character. While with 10% of sustained CD200, you get negative values. So lower intensity compared to the control formulation. And by the way, there is a strong distortion of the fragrance character. So overdose sustain can impair your results. That's why the recommendation is start your testing with 1 or 2% of sustained CD200. And finally, the mode of action. For that, we worked together with North Carolina State University. So the active ingredient of sustained CD200, it's an ester, sucrose acetate isobutyrate, also called SAIB, which is a hydrophobic liquid that does not evaporate. The molecular structure of SAIB has many different functionalities, such as esters, ethers, acetals, as well as many intramolecular dipoles. In these functionalities, they interact with many functional groups in the fragrance molecules, and that increases the attraction between SAIB and the fragrance molecules beyond van der Waals attractions. And this results in a lowering of the vapor pressure of fragrance components. For more details around this study, you can always contact us separately.
Thank you, Ana, for a great explanation of our testing data. Now let's have a look at the properties of our product Sustane CG200. The composition is 90% of the active that Ana just mentioned, and there is 10% synthetic ethanol to adjust the viscosity. If you look at the natural content, if you count all the atoms, we are at 36%. If you count only the carbons, we are at 27%. The molecule is non-animal derived and it is inherently biodegradable. It is insoluble in water. It is soluble in various solvents and fragrances. And in the formulations that were just described, there is no contribution to the color, odor, viscosity, or any appearance of the final formulation. and we produce the active in a dedicated production site in our headquarters in Kingsport, Tennessee in the US. If we look at safety of Sustane CG200, we have looked at inhalation and its skin safety. It is recommended to stay below a dosing level of 15%. We have just seen in the results section that we absolutely don't need to go so high, so we are very good here from inhalation perspective. And we have done a patch test irritation study with 203 participants. Turns out it is non-irritating to the skin and there is no evidence of sensitization. So to sum it all up, Sustane CG200 gives longevity to a wide variety of fragrances without impacting the original character of these fragrances. There is no influence on color, viscosity, or appearance of the final formulations. Due to the viscosity modification, Sustane CG200 is easy to formulate and to use in production. It is derived from sugar, it is inherently biodegradable, it is not animal-based, and it is very safe for consumer use. And with that, we want to thank you for your attention and attendance, and we look forward to any questions you may have.